All right, let's talk honestly about exosomes for a second. Because what's happening right now in skincare and aesthetics is actually much bigger than exosomes themselves. The interesting part isn't even the science, it's the psychology. Because if you really zoom out and look carefully, people are not emotionally reacting to exosomes because they suddenly became fascinated with cellular signaling molecules. Nobody wakes up at 6:30 in the morning thinking, you know what I need today? Advanced extracellular vesicle communication. That's not what's happening. What people are actually reacting to is the idea of regeneration. That's the deeper emotional current underneath all of this. And once you see that, the entire trend starts making a lot more sense. Because for years, most skincare marketing operated through one primary emotional framework: fight aging, attack wrinkles, erase flaws, correct damage. Everything was framed almost like a war against time. And eventually, people got tired, not just physically tired, emotionally tired, tired of aggressive treatments, tired of overfilled faces, tired of overcomplicated routines, tired of feeling like beauty required punishment. And honestly, a lot of consumers started feeling quietly disconnected from the entire experience because somewhere along the way, beauty stopped feeling healthy and started feeling performative. That's where this shift toward regenerative aesthetics begins. Not with exosomes specifically, but with exhaustion, cultural exhaustion. People no longer want to look done. They want to look healthier, fresher, calmer, restored, naturally functioning. That's a very different emotional goal. And exosomes entered the conversation at exactly the right moment psychologically because the word itself sounds futuristic, medical, advanced, almost mysterious. But emotionally, what consumers hear is something much simpler. Maybe my body can repair instead of just being corrected. That's powerful, especially right now, because modern consumers are increasingly obsessed with optimization, but simultaneously terrified of damage. That contradiction defines a huge percentage of modern skincare behavior. People want stronger results, faster results, younger skin, but they also want less downtime, less inflammation, less trauma, more natural outcomes. So when regenerative aesthetics enters the conversation, it feels emotionally safer, even before people fully understand it scientifically. That's important. Most aesthetic decisions are not purely logical decisions. They're emotional decisions that people later justify with logic, and exosomes happen to sit at the intersection of several massive emotional drivers happening simultaneously. Let's break those down, because this is where things get interesting. First, people are emotionally gravitating toward the idea of healing, not punishment. Look at how skincare culture has changed over the last few years. A while ago, the dominant energy was strong acids, over-exfoliation, maximum strength retinoids, aggressive peels, purging, burning, stripping. There was almost this weird belief that visible irritation meant progress. If your face was red, peeling, inflamed, people assumed the product was working. And now, consumers are starting to realize maybe chronic inflammation was never the goal. That realization changed everything. Now, the conversation is barrier repair, skin resilience, calming, inflammation, recovery, skin longevity, collagen preservation. That's not just a skincare trend, that's a philosophical shift. And exosomes fit perfectly into that narrative because they sound less like destruction and more like communication. Less force, more intelligence. That matters psychologically, especially in an era where people increasingly associate wellness with nervous system regulation, recovery optimization, balance, sustainability. The beauty industry always reflects larger cultural psychology, always. And right now, culture is burned out. People are overstimulated, overworked, inflamed, sleep deprived, chronically stressed. So naturally, beauty trends are moving toward restoration, not aggression. That's one reason exosomes exploded emotionally. But there's another layer here too. And this part is even more fascinating. People are no longer chasing perfection, They're chasing believability. That's a huge shift. For years, aesthetics drifted toward hypercorrection, frozen foreheads, overfilled cheeks, artificial symmetry, extreme contouring, and eventually something strange happened. People started becoming uncomfortable with faces that looked overly engineered, not because they looked bad necessarily, but because they stopped looking biologically believable. Humans are incredibly sensitive to subtle facial authenticity, more than people realize. Your brain notices when movement disappears, when proportions shift unnaturally, when expressions stop matching emotion, even subconsciously. So the market started moving in the opposite direction. Now consumers want skin quality, collagen support, texture improvement, hydration, subtle rejuvenation, natural movement, not transformation, refinement. That's why terms like regenerative, biostimulatory, collagen banking, skin quality, cellular repair started resonating so strongly, because emotionally they suggest enhancement without identity loss. That's the key. People want improvement without looking altered, and exosomes became attached to that emotional promise. Now, scientifically speaking, this is where things require nuance. Because one of the problems happening right now is that social media tends to compress very complicated biology into very simplified narratives, which is how you end up with headlines that basically imply magic stem cell skincare fixes everything. That's not reality. And honestly, this is where consumers need calmer, more medically grounded voices, because exosomes are being talked about in ways that are sometimes far ahead of the actual evidence. Now, to be clear, the science itself is genuinely interesting. Exosomes are extracellular vesicles involved in cellular communication. Very simplified. They carry signaling information between cells. That's the scientific foundation that makes them compelling in regenerative medicine conversations. But here's where consumers sometimes get confused. The existence of interesting biology does not automatically equal unlimited cosmetic outcomes. Those are not the same thing. And unfortunately, aesthetic marketing sometimes blurs that distinction. A lot. This creates unrealistic expectations. And expectation management matters enormously in aesthetics, because emotionally, people are often not just buying a treatment, they're buying hope. Hope that they can look healthier again, aging can feel less scary, stress can be reversed, confidence can return, they can still recognize themselves in the mirror. That emotional layer is extremely real, and good medical aesthetics should respect that emotional vulnerability, not exploit it. That distinction matters a lot, because regenerative aesthetics done responsibly can actually be very exciting, especially when approached through skin quality improvement, collagen support, healing optimization, inflammation, reduction, post-procedure recovery. Those are reasonable conversations, but when the messaging turns into, "This changes everything forever," that's usually where reality and marketing begin separating, and consumers are getting smarter about that now. That's another important shift happening. People are becoming deeply skeptical of beauty hype, especially after years of viral trends, influencer overpromising miracle ingredient cycles, sponsored exaggeration. Consumers are increasingly asking, what actually works? What's realistic? What's worth the money? What's just trend inflation? Which means the brands and clinics likely to win over the next decade are probably not the loudest ones. They're the clearest ones, the most honest ones, the ones capable of explaining what something does, what it doesn't do, who it's for, who should skip it, what realistic outcomes look like. That builds trust. And trust is becoming one of the most valuable currencies in aesthetics, especially now, because modern consumers are drowning in information but starving for interpretation. That's a very important difference. There's no shortage of skincare opinions online. What people actually want is clarity, context, translation. They want someone capable of looking at a trend and calmly saying, here's what matters, here's what's exaggerated, here's where this fits, here's where it doesn't. That's where dermatologist-led brands suddenly become incredibly important again, because expertise itself is becoming valuable content. Not just products, not just treatments, interpretation. That's the future. And honestly, This is probably the deeper reason consumers are gravitating toward medically intelligent skincare brands overall. People are tired of guessing. They want frameworks, systems, guidance, reality, not endless trend chasing. Which brings us back to exosomes again. Because the real reason exosomes emotionally resonate so strongly right now is not because consumers fully understand exosome biology. It's because exosomes symbolically represent intelligent healing, softer aesthetics, regenerative thinking, healthier aging, restoration over aggression science that feels futuristic but less harsh. That's the emotional narrative, and emotionally, that narrative arrived at exactly the right cultural moment. Now, where does this go over the next few years? Most likely, the aesthetic industry continues moving toward skin quality over excessive volume, regeneration over overcorrection, collagen preservation over dramatic alteration, longevity over quick fixes, subtlety over obvious procedures, individualized protocols over generic treatments, which honestly, it is probably healthier for the industry overall. Because the future of aesthetics likely isn't about looking like someone else. It's about looking like yourself, with less inflammation, better skin quality, more vitality, and healthier biological function over time. That's a much more sustainable direction emotionally, and ironically, that may be the real thing people are searching for underneath all these regenerative trends. Not perfection, not transformation, just the feeling that maybe aging doesn't have to feel like constant decline. And psychologically, that's an incredibly powerful idea, especially in a world where people increasingly feel exhausted by almost everything else. Now, does that mean exosomes are magic? No, nothing is magic. Not in medicine, not in skincare, not in biology. But are they part of a larger and very real shift toward regenerative aesthetics? Absolutely. And that larger shift is probably far more important than any single ingredient or treatment trend itself. Because trends come and go, but major emotional shifts in how people think about beauty, those tend to last much longer. And right now, the emotional shift happening in aesthetics is very clear. People no longer want aggressive beauty, they want intelligent beauty, calmer beauty, healthier beauty, more believable beauty. And honestly, that may end up being one of the most important aesthetic shifts of the next decade. May your skin always glow as brightly as your smile. Lazuk Aesthetics, Alpharetta, Georgia.